Tracy Sable tonight on EWTN News Nightly. Pushing forward. The Senate has passed the debt limit bill, sending it to the White House. We have team coverage. Threat from Beijing. How China is responding to the recent trade deal between the United States and Taiwan. Cause for concern. Why pro-lifers are sounding the alarm over recent high-tech medical developments. And focus on families. The Vatican announces a new initiative for Catholic education. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of Saints Marcellinus and Peter. Our top stories tonight. Much of the nation is breathing a sigh of relief after the U.S. Senate passed a bill last night preventing a first-ever government default. But in the hours before the vote, the outcome was less than clear. Senate lawmakers had to get through a dozen amendments. Any one of them could have sunk the bill. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest and what's next.
The Senate hallways are all quiet now, but a much different story late last night when lawmakers passed the debt ceiling bill and avoided an economic catastrophe. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he was relieved.
We've saved the country from the scourge of default, even though there were some on the other side who wanted default, wanted to lead us to default. We may be a little tired, but we did it.
But getting there meant no amendments could be added. Otherwise, the bill would have to head back to the House for another vote. Senators tried to make their case, including Republican Rand Paul, who had his own plan to balance the budget.
We're proposing that we reduce the top-line spending according to the penny plan. The penny plan is a budget that I put forward every year for several years now, and it balances the budget over 5 years.
Republican Senator Mike Braun tells me he doesn't want to see another near crisis again.
My amendment will be that next time that we arrive at this point in time, you'd automatically lift the debt ceiling. And if you don't pass a real bill in 30 days, there's a 1% cut across the board.
Virginia Democrat Senator Tim Kaine took issue with the inclusion of a 300-mile natural gas pipeline project favored by West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin.
A last-minute deal dropped into a debt ceiling deal. This takes people who already have felt like they've been kicked around and makes them feel worse. And I'm not going to stand for it.
This transformational project will create more than 2,500 jobs, generate $50 million in tax revenue, and more than $175 million in royalties for West Virginia landowners, and play a significant role in strengthening our domestic energy production.
Looking ahead, some members of the House Freedom Caucus may be using the passage of the bill to trigger their attempt to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. They say the Speaker didn't get enough spending cuts with this bill. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Joe Biden will speak to the nation tonight from the Oval Office on the debt limit deal. In a statement released late last night after the Senate vote, the president said that he looked forward to signing the bill into law as soon as possible and called it a win for the American people. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, good evening to you. The president also said in that statement, America is a nation that pays its bills and meets its obligations. And in the briefing room today, the press secretary went before the cameras.
The bipartisan budget agreement protects our historic and hard-earned economic recovery.
And with the threat of economic catastrophe caused by default now in the rearview mirror,
the work is far from finished, but this bipartisan agreement is a reminder of what's possible when we act in the best interest of our country.
Meanwhile, the nation's employers stepped up their hiring in May, adding 339,000 jobs, well above expectations. President Joe Biden called it a good day for the American economy, adding the Biden economic plan is working. But the GOP sees it differently, tweeting, real wages are down, as 60% of workers report living paycheck to paycheck, and 83% say the economic situation of the nation is negative. Biden's inflation is killing the financial well-being of American families. Also today, in a visit to Finland, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent wave after wave of Russians into a meat grinder of his own making.
The Kremlin often claimed it had the second strongest military in the world, and many believed it. Today, many see Russia's military as the second strongest in Ukraine.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration is ready to talk to Russia without conditions about a future nuclear arms control framework. In Washington, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan delivers remarks at the Arms Control Association's annual meeting.
Earlier this year, President Putin unlawfully suspended Russia's implementation of the New START treaty that places limits on the most destructive weapons in our arsenals, the kinds that could destroy the world many times over.
In addition, the U.S. worries about China's growing arsenal, which could include 1,500 nuclear warheads by the year 2035. Also tonight, we're learning the CIA director went to Beijing in May to meet with his Chinese counterparts. It's the highest level visit by a Biden administration official since a suspected Chinese spy balloon was shot down by American forces. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
We go now to Joel Griffith, Economist and Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Joel, always great to have you on. First off, I want to get your take on this debt limit spending deal.
Oh, well, this is such a bad deal for the American people. Under this compromise, federal spending next year is actually likely to increase yet again. It only reduces a small portion of the overall budget. And we got to remember the federal budget right now is almost 50% larger than it was just prior to COVID. So basically what this compromise does, it freezes into place this enormous government expansion. And then starting next year, it starts increasing spending once again. It keeps in place so much of the Green New Deal, keeps in place funding for 87,000 tax agents. Even it fails to address the nearly $1 trillion in student loan forgiveness that Biden has proposed through changes to the repayment plans.
Joe, what would you have liked to see come out of this deal?
Well, I would have loved to see that any increase in the debt ceiling be met with real spending cuts. The initial proposal from Republican conservatives was to reduce federal spending by $4 for every dollar increase in the debt ceiling. But in exchange for what we thought was going to be a decent deal, we end up spending even more money. And we end up not just lifting the debt ceiling, they've actually scrapped the debt ceiling. There is no debt limit until the beginning of 2025, which is also something very important. The deal expires on January 1st of 2025, and that's an important date because at that point, we're going to have a lame duck Congress. We're going to have a lame duck president because the new Congress and new president won't be sworn into office for several more weeks. And that means a Democrat progressive president. And once again, a bunch of free spending people in Congress are likely going to go through this shenanigan all again and increase the debt ceiling yet more.
Joe, I want to go back, to the present day here. How have the markets been responding to this current news?
Well, the markets are up the last 2 days. It might be partially due to the fact that the debt ceiling was lifted. There was a lot of needless hysteria about a potential default. The administration and even some Republicans had tried to convince the public that we would default on June 1st. That was not the case. We would have seen a simple prioritization of spending. We had plenty of tax revenue coming in to cover Social Security, to cover defense spending, to cover interest on the debt. We would have simply had a partial government shutdown. All of this hysteria was manufactured, and it resulted in trillions of dollars of additional deficit spending.
Joe, it doesn't sound like you like this deal at all, but if you were to pick a winner, who would it be?
The winner, I would say, in the words of one of Biden's top economists, the winner are progressives, because this cements into place a lot of progressive spending proposals. Think about all the outrage that we saw just a year ago as conservatives when the Biden administration pushed through hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies for solar panels and for wind turbines and for all of these green energy projects that are going to jump energy prices for the American people. This deal leaves that in place. Think about all the outrage, rightful outrage that we've had over all of the student loan forgiveness plans and the student loan freezes, forcing the majority of Americans who don't have a college education to pay the bills of those who took on college debt. This deal leaves in place up to $1 trillion of Biden plans to actually forgive yet more student loans. So this is an absolute failure for conservatives. And if you didn't like the inflation that we saw over the last 2 years because of all the money that was printed, we're not going to like at all the inflation that's going to be caused down the road because our central bank is going to have to print trillions of dollars to finance all of this additional spending that Republicans and Democrats just pushed through Congress.
Joel, we have a little less than a minute left, but I want to talk about the jobs report that was released today. What's your take on that, and what does it signal to you?
Well, if you dig a little deeper in the jobs report, it showed over 300,000 jobs created last month. But what's really interesting are that all of those jobs are actually part-time jobs. The number of full-time jobs has actually been declining. And this suggests that a lot of people are, by need, taking on multiple jobs because the full-time jobs are not there in abundance like they were before. Something else, a big takeaway from the report, are that wages did increase year over year by around 4%. But remember, inflation has been over 6%. So for the 23rd consecutive month, we've actually seen year over year real wages decline. This is a continuation of that. Real families have lost around $7,000 in real wages the last 2 years. And the jobs report, I know the market is screaming higher today. That's because looking at that top line number. You dig a little deeper and you realize full-time jobs are actually declining.
Joe, we're going to leave it right there. Always great to have you on and get your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy.
China is speaking out after the recent trade agreement between the United States and Taiwan. China's foreign minister says the deal gives Washington a free pass to control Taipei's economic well-being. The accord was signed earlier this week. It seeks to strengthen relations by improving trade and investment between Washington and Taiwan. Well, at least 9 people have been killed in violent clashes in Senegal. The clashes between police and supporters of the opposition leader began after he was convicted Thursday on charges of corrupting youth. Usaman Sako was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He is considered the main challenger in the West African nation's 2024 presidential election. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of Spain says that it has found evidence of 728 sexual abusers in the church dating back to the 1940s. More than half of the offenders were found to be priests. Church leaders say 3/4 of the claims came before 1990. The leaders also say the report leaves them feeling, quote, pain and shame. An archdiocese in Peru is helping to fight a recent outbreak of a deadly fever being spread by mosquitoes. To fight the epidemic, the archdiocese is donating thousands of doses of medication. The archbishop has called on all institutions to assist. More than 100,000 cases have been reported. The fever can cause bleeding and, in some cases, even death. We have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including a hazard to humanity, why the next steps in tech innovations could gravely impact the human race, and an end to all torture. Pope Francis shares his prayer intention for the month of June. The Republican governor of Nevada signed a pro-abortion measure earlier this week. The bill would protect those who violate abortion laws from other states. Governor Joe Lombardo says on his website that he is pro-life and Catholic. Last week, the FDA gave the green light to Elon Musk company Neuralink to begin human trials. The FDA approval is a milestone for the brain chip company. It hopes the implants will one day help and improve the lives of people with conditions such as depression, schizophrenia, autism, and even obesity. And while the technology may be well-intentioned, many experts say there are a number of ethical concerns. Here now to discuss this and more is Dr. Joseph Meaney, president of the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Dr. Meaney, great to have you on. First off, let's talk about the ethical concerns surrounding this brain implant device.
Right. So it's one of these things that happens a lot with new technologies, is that it can be used to treat real medical conditions, but it could also have unwanted uses. And one of the biggest concerns is privacy, and also the capacity of like transmitting thoughts to the person. So maybe manipulating or even altering their perception or behavior. And, you know, there's also a whole class of people who believe in transhumanism, right, who are hoping to enhance human beings, so not really treat medical conditions, but try to create superhumans. So huge numbers of ethical concerns.
Yeah, and Dr. Meaney, do you think this technology, I mean, do you think will actually have the potential to provide real, therapeutic benefits?
Yeah, I think that the principal benefit seems to be allowing people who are amputees to control artificial limbs. But there are also neurological conditions that might be able to be treated, such as epilepsy or Parkinson's. So there could be some real therapeutic benefits.
Yeah, what about the potential long-term dangers of such technology? And where do you see this all going?
Right. So the idea of putting a chip into a person's brain and using Bluetooth technology to transmit thoughts back and forth to an external computer. I mean, the thought of people being able to hack into that, being able to manipulate what people perceive or what they do, all those things are kind of scary. And the thought is that, this is kind of the first step, but then these things could become even more powerful. We don't know what kind of changes to the human brain might be made by implanting these kind of chips in them. And so there's real reason to be very leery and to be very cautious about how one goes about this beyond, treating medical conditions that are real serious conditions, but looking at all the other risks that are out there.
Yeah, I want to pivot now to something else. The Universal Law Commission is proposing changing the legal definition of death. Can you tell us more about that? And also what the Catholic Church accepts as the definition of death?
Right. It's very important to note that the Uniform Definition of Death Act, which was passed in 1981, and then most of the states in the U.S. have adapted a version of that, came from the Uniform Law Commission. And it essentially says that a person is dead if there's a permanent cessation of circulatory and regulatory functions, respiratory functions, or irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem. Now, the proposal that is being brought forward is to change that latter part to say that a person who has in a permanent coma, permanent cessation of spontaneous respiratory functions, and permanent loss of brainstem reflexes is dead. So essentially saying that a brain-injured person, severely brain-injured, but not dead, could be treated as if they were dead. And that would not be acceptable under Catholic teaching. St. John Paul II was very clear that it might be acceptable to look at, a complete irreversible cessation of all activities of the brain as a form of determination of death, but nothing like a permanent coma could ever be considered death.
Now, if a change to this definition of death, if that occurs, what will be the implications as far as medical practice?
Yeah, so the first thing that would happen is that individuals being declared dead who are in a permanent coma would then cease all medical treatment, right? And once a person is determined to be dead, they will no longer receive treatment. Also, vital organs could be taken from them. The dead donor rule says that you cannot take any vital organs from an individual who's not been determined to be dead. However, a person in a permanent coma could be declared dead and then their organs taken out, which would actually kill them, as opposed to them really donating their organs after death.
Dr. Meaney, we probably have about 30 seconds left or so, but what else do you think is really important for our viewers to know about this?
I think it's just important to realize that this is the Uniform Law Commission, so it's not a law itself. But if enough organizations and groups protest and say we want a definition of death that we can all agree on, as opposed to watering down this definition, that is really the best thing that can happen. So it's going to be happening in July, their meeting, and there needs to be then a lot of protest, I think, if this proposal goes forward.
Well, Dr. Meaney, always great to be with you. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. We appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, Family Matters. The Vatican backs an initiative to enhance research on families. Plus, the Holy Father shares his prayer intention for the month of June. A German newspaper says the longtime private secretary of late Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI has been ordered to leave the Vatican. The report says the 66-year-old was informed of the Holy Father's decision during a private audience in May. Archbishop Georg Gangswein is expected to return to his diocese in southwest Germany. Neither he nor the Vatican has commented on the story. Pope Francis says that he supports an initiative to enhance research at Catholic universities regarding family, marriage, and childbearing. The project is called the Family Global Compact. It was introduced earlier this week by a Vatican department. EWTN Vatican journalist Matteo Ciofi has more.
The Dicastery for Laity, Family and Life has launched a new Family Global Compact with a message of support from Pope Francis. Charged with a message from the Holy Father saying it will enable the pastoral care of families in the particular churches to benefit from the research and the educational and training programs in Catholic universities. The new compact is a collaboration with the Dicastery and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences and creates a working agenda for new social, economic and cultural policies, as well as new services for families in parishes, for centers for family life at Catholic universities and other institutions around the world to develop and explore.
So there was a work that began between some of the academicians and some of the leaders of the dicastery that then involved this Center for Research on the Family, which did all the work on finding the centers in the different Catholic universities. And then together, the idea was to put together this compact, especially oriented towards the universities. But of course, the compact could be expanded to more actors. But right now, it's focusing on the universities to really help them build a kind of synergy and become much more effective with a much stronger voice on the question of the family in the world.
Pope Francis said it's not meant to be a static program, but a journey of Christian communities and universities supporting each other in identifying common goals for enriching and promoting the culture of the family in society. Together, each will identify proposals to promote and support family life and identify the challenges faced by families in the world today.
The family is so central to every aspect of human life, and yet it's not really talked about that much in the media, in politics. It's certainly not seen as a major player in the economy, this kind of thing. So we're trying to make a major shift in the way that people think about the family. Of course, it's important for our emotional support, but it's a much, much bigger, a much more crucial player.
Pope Francis concluded his message with a reflection, noting the critical role of the family and its positive effects as a generator of the common good. It's the entire ecclesial and civil community, therefore, that enjoys the presence of healthy families, which the Pope called an irreplaceable wealth. In Rome, Matteo Ciofi, EWTN News Nightly.
Finally tonight, Pope Francis is calling for an end to all forms of torture.
La tortura. Dios mío, la tortura.
And his prayer intention for the month of June, the Holy Father says torture not only existed in the past, it also remains, quote, a scourge in the present day. Let us put a stop to this horror, he adds, adding the dignity of the human person must be at the forefront of all of our actions. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night, and God bless.
Thank you.